Maria, my mother said she wants to talk to you about inheritance, so call her, my husband said to me a few days after my father passed away. What? Why? My father had passed away just a few days earlier, and I was still grieving. My husband seemed indifferent to it all. Why is your mother talking about my father's inheritance? I don't know. Just call her tomorrow. My husband seemed so detached from it all. When did he become like this? My name is Maria. I'm a 48-year-old company employee. I quit my job for a while, but started working again after my child-rearing years were over. My husband Paul is the same age as me and we work at the same company. We got married when we were 22 years old and had our son George the following year. We've spent half our lives together. We used to be comfortable around each other, but lately I've been noticing more and more of his unpleasant side. I was focused on raising our son, but when George was 3 years old, my husband suddenly said, "I'm quitting my job." When I asked him why, he said he didn't like his boss and that he should be making more money. He said he wanted to quit because he saw his colleagues leaving for better jobs. My husband is easily influenced by others, and this bad habit of his was showing again. The result of his job change wasn't great. He got a slight raise, but he didn't fit in with his new colleagues and found the work boring. He used to be more lively when we worked together, but at some point he became dull. My husband's only pleasure seems to be going back to his parents' house. His parents' house is about a 30-minute drive away, so we go there often on weekends. At first I went with him, but since it was too frequent, I stayed home with George more often. There are many of my husband's classmates in the neighborhood of his parents' house, and I think he relies on them because he doesn't have any close friends at work. I've told him several times that we should go out as a family or play with George instead of just going to his parents' house all the time, but he refused because George doesn't like him. We hardly ever went out as a family. Instead, we often went out with my parents and George. My father bought real estate during the bubble economy and had passive income from it. He also worked as an ordinary company employee, so I think we were relatively well off. My parents always came to pick us up in their car when we went out. I thought my in-laws didn't want to see George because they didn't invite him over or complain about it, but it seems they like their son more than their grandson. That kind of life continued until George was in junior high school. It became less frequent when he became a junior high school student, but when I told my father about it, he seemed sad. My father bought a high-rise condominium that was being built near where we lived. When I asked him why, he said that you could see fireworks from the room and seemed excited about it. He remembered how impressed George was when they went to see fireworks before and thought that if they could see fireworks from the condominium, George would be happy too. When my parents started living in the high-rise condominium, George was already a high school student, but when I told him about my father's idea, he immediately visited his grandparents to see the fireworks. Since then, they have gathered there on the day of the fireworks festival every year. My mother said that my father who said that someday he would drink alcohol with George while watching fireworks was cute. My mother was originally weak in health and died after a while. It was sad even though I had prepared for it. However, on the day of the fireworks festival every year, we visited my father's place with George without fail. When George turned 20 years old and drank alcohol with my father for the first time on the day of the fireworks festival, my father was really happy. My husband only went once at first. The next time he met my father was at my mother's funeral. My husband is still easily swayed, and when the topic of cleaning the house comes up around him, he suddenly starts cleaning. When someone says they went to a popular spot with their child, he suddenly wants to go with us even though he rarely goes out with us. Well, I don't think he's a bad person at heart, and I've accepted it because we can live relatively comfortably. But things have changed. My father collapsed and passed away at work. His colleagues called an ambulance for him, but he passed away at the hospital. He had an acute myocardial infarction, and if he had collapsed at home, he might have been left there for days. Maybe it was better that he collapsed in a public place. My husband and George also came to see him, but they didn't make it in time. We finished the funeral somehow while grieving. Then an unexpected person spoke to me. "Maria, are you okay?" It was my mother-in-law who said that. I didn't have much contact with her, but I thought my in-laws were worried about me. That high-rise condominium is still worth a lot because it's in a redevelopment area. You can get a considerable amount of money if you sell it now. I was stunned by her unexpected words, and my mother-in-law continued. Only Maria will inherit the estate. It's good that you don't have to worry about money for the time being. I didn't have the slightest idea about inheritance. Yet these people were worried about inheritance and approached me. I tried to suppress my anger as much as possible and told my in-laws. I'll think about it slowly. Then I asked them to leave. Then my husband asked me, can that high-rise condominium really be sold for such a high price? The redevelopment plan had been discussed for some time, and my father had said that a large commercial facility would be built there and other condominiums would be built as well. But when I heard my husband ask such a question now, I was annoyed. A few days after my father's funeral, my mother said she wants to talk to you about inheritance. My husband said, what? Why is your mother talking about my father's inheritance? I was a little annoyed that this was not enough information. I don't know. Anyway, call her tomorrow. My anger also rose against my husband who said so. The next day, I couldn't bring myself to call my mother-in-law, but she called me instead. You're going to sell the high-rise condominium, right? Should I ask my acquaintance about a real estate agent? She suddenly said such a thing. I never said anything about selling it. When I said so, it's better to do this kind of thing quickly. Let me know anytime because I'll help you. She hung up the phone. After that, when I told my husband about it when he came home. What does Maria want? Do you plan to live there? He asked me. The distance from the station is a disadvantage. Well, maybe selling it is reasonable. I said so. After that, my mother-in-law kept asking if we hadn't sold it yet or introduced us to real estate agents, so I told her clearly. I also have friends who are real estate agents. Don't worry about me, this is my problem. But she said. What are you talking about? We're family. Ask us anything. She said that and started calling me frequently even though she hadn't called me before. Anyway, if we put it up for sale, maybe my mother-in-law will stop attacking us. So I decided to consult with a friend who is a real estate agent and proceed with the sale. When my mother-in-law called and my husband came home from work after that, I told them we were going to sell it and the phone attacks from my mother-in-law stopped for now, so I'm relieved. 3 months later, I was contacted that a buyer had been found. It was said that it would be worth quite a bit, but it was beyond my imagination. Then, when my husband returned home from work, he suddenly said, so how much did it sell for in the end? I hid my confusion as to why my husband knew and told him a lie, I still don't know. It's not selling at all. He started watching TV with a sound. I didn't know if he was interested or not. The next day, it was Saturday and I was relaxing when the intercom rang. When I went out to see who it was my parents-in-law. Paul? Your father-in-law and mother-in-law are here, but what's going on? When I called out to my husband like that, he invited his parents in. Then my mother-in-law handed me a piece of paper. When I looked down at it with suspicion, it was a divorce paper. I was confused and my mother-in-law said, Maria, how long are you going to live off Paul? This child has been coming home a lot because he's tired of living with you, There were too many things to point out and I didn't know what to say. For the time being, I asked my husband. What do you mean? Does Paul think so too? He nodded. I didn't understand the meaning of this conversation that had never come up before. My husband continued. If we get divorced and split the money, we can live for a while, can't we? My parents-in-law also nodded. A friend of mine who is a real estate agent said that the high-rise condominium sold for a considerable amount of money. If that's the case, we'll get a lot of money and we'll be able to live for a while even if we get divorced. What is this person? They're unbelievable people. While I was stunned, my husband began filling out the divorce papers. My husband really intends to get divorced. Do my parents-in-law want my husband to come back to their house, or do they hate me? They must have whispered something to my husband and he must have been swayed again. So they want me to get divorced and take the money from the high-rise condominium that has been inherited by me. My husband must have thought it was a good idea and it made me sad, but he probably thinks that he can get away with getting an inheritance himself if he gets divorced. However, inherited property is not subject to property division. Knowing this, I snatched away the divorce papers and filled them all out on the spot. When I said that I would take care of it, my husband said, "It's too much trouble, so just do it. And I'm leaving here so Maria can live here," he said as he left with his parents. He said he would come back later for only his large luggage and left pulling his suitcase. They must have planned with their parents-in-law and waited for the right time to leave. Since they are preparing to leave home properly, there is nothing more to say to my husband. I called my son George on the phone and told him about this incident. "What? What's that all about?" George was angrier than me, but after thinking about something. "Just wait a little bit before submitting the divorce papers," he said. I asked him why, but he didn't answer, so there must be something he's thinking about, so I decided to wait for George's call. A week later, George came to my house. They were thinking about this, he said, taking out several photos. It was my parents-in-law's house. However, it was not the old-fashioned house that had been there until now, but a new one, so I didn't know until he told me. When I asked what it meant, he said that his university friend lived near my parents-in-law's house and took these photos. Moreover, my parents-in-law had been boasting about it in the neighborhood, saying that they had recently rebuilt it. George's friend had fun playing detective and took these photos. And this. George threw another photo on the table. There was a woman I didn't know with my husband. My friend was having fun with surveillance, and he said he took this kind of photo and followed them. Next, there was a photo of my husband and a woman I didn't know entering a hotel with their arms around each other. There were also photos of the two of them entering my parents-in-law's house together. I was stunned. Was my husband cheating? Perhaps he had been going to my parents' house so often to meet this woman? Moreover, if the two of them entered my parents' house together, does that mean it was approved by my parents-in-law? According to the information he asked about, Dad is going to get married soon. That's why they rebuilt the house. George said. Isn't George's friend too capable? With this much evidence, I can claim compensation and get divorced. Of course, I won't give him the money from selling the high-rise condominium. I made up my mind to start looking for a lawyer. The next weekend, my husband called. "Hey, what do you mean you haven't submitted the divorce papers again?" he said in an unusually irritable tone. "Oh, I'm busy and can't go to the city hall easily." "How did you find out? Are you trying to remarry someone?" When I said that, my husband got even angrier. "What are you talking about? Anyway, if you don't submit the divorce papers quickly, I'll ask a lawyer to divorce you forcibly." It must have hit home. Okay. I just asked a lawyer too. When I said that, my husband's tone changed. Huh? Lawyer? Yes, I think I'm going to ask for compensation. Compensation? For what? My husband seemed to be in a hurry and his voice got louder. For cheating. You cheated every time you went back to your parents' house? How long has it been going on? I sighed. No. That was a high school classmate. He said he divorced and went back to his parents' house and only lasted about 2 years. My husband stopped as if he had realized something when he said that much. Oh, 2 years. A high school classmate. Thank you for the useful information. My husband laughed it off. Oh, yeah, it's been 2 years. But we're getting married soon. So if you don't submit the divorce papers quickly, we'll be in trouble because both parents have agreed. You're talking a lot, but are you okay? Then my husband laughed through his nose. There's no way I'm asking for compensation for cheating. Because if we get divorced, we'll divide our property. Actually, the lawyer has already set his sights on that. The money from selling your high-rise condominium is quite a bit even after dividing our property, so compensation is just a small amount. My husband started saying nonsensical things. Did you rebuild your parents' house with that money? I'm taking out a loan in my name, but if we divide the property, I can change it all at once. I laughed at his excited tone. Are you serious? My father's condominium was sold, but that money is not subject to property division. What? Why? Did neither you nor your parents know that? You're so ignorant. And you're already jumping the gun and rebuilding the house? Unbelievable. I looked at my watch. It was almost time. By the way, Paul, are you at home now? Yeah, why? My husband still sounded confused. Well, I'll be there soon. I heard the intercom over the phone and told my husband to answer it. George. My husband's surprised voice echoed. George had gone to see my husband with a lawyer. He probably had something he wanted to say to him as his son, and he casually said he would also claim damages while he was at it since I had no intention of meeting him. I don't care if you divorce me. I don't have many memories with you anyway. But if you try to take Grandpa's inheritance from Mom, I won't forgive you. I have more memories with Grandpa, Grandma, and Mom than with you. I heard George's voice over the phone. Tears came to my eyes at his words. Afterwards, I claimed damages for my husband's infidelity and we were divorced. It seems that the person who had an affair with him was told that he was divorced and single. And he seems to have been sued for marriage fraud. I heard from George's friend that my in-laws had just finished building their house but were already putting it up for sale. My husband didn't seem to have quit his job, so maybe he moved into the company housing or my in-laws' house. However, it was an old building with a bad reputation for human relationships. Well, it's good that he has a place to live. I hope he works hard. I sold my father's high-rise condominium and bought a well-located condominium with the money. George said he would come see me with his girlfriend this summer because they could see fireworks from there. I imagined attending my son's wedding in the future and was grateful for how much he had grown. My husband said,
"Get divorced right away."
And handed me a divorce paper. I understand. Let's get divorced.
You are unlucky. I never thought you would be burdened with a debt that you can't pay off even if you spend your whole life paying it back, especially from your own parents.
I told my husband, who was grinning while misunderstanding a certain fact.
Wait. What do you mean?
My name is Sally. I'm a 40-year-old company employee. It's been exactly 10 years since I married my husband Sean. We don't have children, and we tried infertility treatment, but it didn't work out, so we decided to live together as a couple. Still, I think we're living happily enough. My husband is a little stubborn, so we have regular fights, but we don't hate each other and talk every day. He doesn't complain about what I do, and he works hard and earns money, so there are no big problems for now. My husband and I were originally classmates in high school. We were in the same class in the first and second years of high school. Moreover, both of us were in the basketball club, so we often practiced together after school. We weren't dating when we were high school students, but we were good friends in the same class. The reason why we got married was because of a certain wedding. When we were 27 years old, a member of the basketball club in high school got married. At that time, members of the basketball club gathered regardless of gender and had a reunion-like gathering. And I reunited with my husband. It was an opportunity when our seats became next to each other at the second party, and we started going out for drinks after work together and then went on several dates, and our relationship started. After about 3 years of dating, we decided to get married. I think it was good that I could get married at the age of 30. In my 20s after graduating from college, I wanted to concentrate on work and get results, and I thought about getting married after entering my 30s. Sean was a very kind and good person, so I think it was really good that Sean was my marriage partner. At the wedding ceremony, not only former basketball club members but also many friends and colleagues congratulated us, and we tasted the greatest happiness. Then we started living together and started our newlywed life. Even though we had been friends since high school, being newlyweds felt special and fresh. Even though more than 10 years have passed since we met each other and 3 years have passed since we started dating, I think the newlywed magic is amazing. My husband, considering that we both work, shared housework properly. Although most of them were simple, I am grateful that dinner was ready when he came back from work. During meals, we talked about our work and encouraged each other. My husband said,
"Oh man, I was really busy today. My boss gave me a lot of work."
I replied, "I see. Good job. Let me give you one more potato." We enjoyed our new married life happily like children. We continued to live happily as a couple, but as I mentioned earlier, we couldn't have children easily. We tried infertility treatment and pregnancy preparation, but it didn't work out. We couldn't have children even after many years had passed, so we gradually gave up and decided to spend time together as a couple only. However, since then, my husband has become somewhat cold to me. If someone says it's just my imagination, then so be it, but I feel like his usual kindness has decreased. Until now, he listened to my opinions and considered them, but now he tries to force his own opinions on me. Maybe he was considerate of me before and maybe he started showing his true self from around this time. Even so, I didn't want to break up with him because I still loved him, but I felt a little lonely that he treated me carelessly. This feeling started about 3 years ago. Well, we will spend a long time together as a couple from now on, so it's better for him to be in his natural state as much as possible. However, his treatment of me has gotten worse year by year. The reason is that although we shared housework because we both worked together before, he stopped doing any housework at all. Of course, I don't want my husband to do housework mainly. However, it was tough when he didn't prepare dinner even when I was busy with overtime work or something like that. And my husband started coming home late without any contact with me more often than before. Even though I prepared dinner after work with a tired body, when he came back in the middle of the night and said,
"Sorry, I already ate."
I was really annoyed. But since he worked hard and earned money for us and didn't complain when I used my time and money for hobbies on my day off, I tolerated it thinking it was okay. However, recently an event happened that made me strongly feel that my husband no longer loves me. He forgot our 10th wedding anniversary, which was the day we were supposed to go to a fancy restaurant I had been wanting to go to for a long time. I had even made a reservation, but he forgot. On the day of the anniversary, I asked him if he could meet me at the restaurant at 7 p.m., and he replied,
"What?"
I was surprised and got emotional. Didn't I tell you that we were going to celebrate our 10th wedding anniversary today? And I even made a reservation. When I said that, my husband was surprised at first, but then became unhappy.
"Don't get angry. You've been so noisy since this morning."
What do you mean by noisy? Do you think our married life is not important anymore? I think you've been treating me very carelessly, I said. Suddenly, all the frustration that had been building up inside me exploded, and I ended up taking it out on my husband. Then my husband got angry.
"What? You're such a pain in the ass. What's with this 40-year-old woman talking like a little girl? Think about your age."
Wait. Sean.
"I'm done with this. I'm going to work now. Don't say anything weird and make things difficult for me. Oh, and cancel the reservation because I have a drinking party with my colleagues today."
What? My husband said that and went to work. I was shocked by what he said and froze for a while. It was too much. Can we continue our married life like this? I started thinking about it. Since it would cause trouble for the restaurant if we canceled on the day of the reservation, I decided to go to the restaurant with my father instead. It was close to my father's birthday, so it was good as a substitute for his celebration, but my husband's attitude really shocked me. My father was also surprised when he heard my story.
Sean said that. "I always celebrated our wedding anniversary in a big way with your mother, so I can't understand what he's saying."
My mother passed away a few years ago, but my father really cherished her. I had seen how close my parents were and wanted to build that kind of relationship with my husband too, but it was sad that we had become so cold towards each other.
"Well, if anything happens, rely on your father."
Okay, thank you. Although I was very shocked, talking to my father made me feel a little calmer. My husband didn't come home that night. He came back early in the morning and went straight to bed and slept. Since then, we hardly talked anymore. My husband worked overtime almost every day and came home less often than before. If things continue like this, it may be difficult to continue our married life. When I was thinking about such things, something unbelievable happened to me. My father had a heart attack and died on the spot. My head went blank. I was grieving for my father, who was my only relative after losing my mother. However, when I told my husband that my father had passed away, he replied with a cold,
"I see."
And I was suddenly filled with anger. I knew he didn't love me anymore. But since it was my wife's father who had died, he could have shown some kindness by grieving or comforting me. In a way, thanks to my husband, I regained my composure and proceeded with the arrangements and preparations for the funeral. And we were able to hold my father's funeral without any problems. Although my husband attended the funeral, he looked bored from start to finish, which really made me angry. My love for him disappeared all at once. Then a few days later, a lawyer came to the house and talked about the inheritance, but at that time, I clashed with my husband again. The lawyer said,
"Regarding Mr. Sally's inheritance, there is first a debt of 100 million yen.
At that moment, my husband raised his voice.
What? A debt of 100 million yen? There's no way we can pay that.
Wait a minute, let's listen to the end.
Don't be ridiculous. I can't continue my married life with a woman who is in debt. Get divorced now."
My husband said that and handed me a divorce paper. Huh? Are you serious?
I'm serious. Besides, our relationship as husband and wife is already falling apart.
That's because you're communicating less and less with me.
Shut up. Anyway, I can't continue my married life with a woman who is in debt. Sign this divorce paper.
Okay. Let's get divorced. I received the divorce paper from my husband and signed it. I was angry that it was already filled out when he prepared it, but I was glad that I could completely cut off ties with my husband. And there was still something else I thought was good about being separated from my husband. In my mind, I laughed and said, "Then I'll submit this. Lawyer, can I have the documents because I will inherit it properly?"
I understand.
I proceeded with the inheritance procedures for my father's estate. Thank you very much.
Sally's father's estate has been inherited by Sally.
For now, I sent the lawyer back and immediately went to the city hall to submit the divorce paper. When I returned home, my husband was waiting with a triumphant look on his face.
You're unlucky too. Who would have thought that you would be burdened with a debt of an amount that you couldn't pay for your entire life from your own parents?
My husband was still smiling while misunderstanding something, so I told him a certain fact. I asked the lawyer on the phone, but what I inherited wasn't just debt.
What?
My father's debt was about the newly built house.
A house? Wait a minute, what do you mean?
My father bought a house for me. So he took out a loan for it. But he died of myocardial infarction right after he bought it, so there was almost no money left on the loan balance. That's why they said there was a debt of 100 million yen. At first, I thought it was strange because my father was an executive at his company and had made money from stock investments, so he wouldn't have borrowed money.
Stocks.
As part of his inheritance, my father left me an amount of money that would cover the debt without me having to pay it back. So not only do I not have any debt, but I also get a lot of money.
What? I didn't hear anything. Don't mess around.
But isn't it because you didn't listen to everything until the end?
Then give me half of your inheritance.
What are you talking about? The inheritance share is not included in property division.
Huh?
We're already divorced now, so it doesn't matter how much money comes to me. When I said that, my husband suddenly changed his attitude and turned over his palm.
Sally, let's pretend we didn't get divorced. I finally realized who is really important. We are in love with each other again. Let's get married again.
Beyond losing affection, disgust arose in me. Stop it. It's disgusting. You're not after me, but after the money that came to me. I won't start married life again with such a person. Don't underestimate me. When I pack up my things, I'll leave. You should just live your normal life as usual. If you bother me again, I'll call the police. You and I are strangers now, but. My husband turned pale when he heard what I said. Ignoring him like that, I packed up my things and left home. Afterwards, I moved into the house my father had built for me. It was really luxurious and beautiful as expected since it cost 100 million yen. I'll be able to spend time here comfortably forever. By the way, regarding my ex-husband, I asked a private investigator just to be sure and found out that he had been having an affair with another woman since we were married. I immediately sent a certified letter to my ex-husband and his mistress's workplace to demand compensation for adultery. As a result, my ex-husband had to work hard to pay the compensation while being looked at coldly by his colleagues. I inherited all of my father's estate and received compensation for the adultery, so I should be financially secure in my retirement. However, I also want to follow in my father's footsteps and increase my assets through stocks and other means. From now on, while focusing on work, I want to challenge myself as much as possible in other hobbies or things I want to try. So it turns out that your ex-husband was being cold towards you because he was having an affair. But in the end, he suffered a huge loss because of it. You're better off without him. You can now spend your days in peace without worrying about money. Please challenge yourself as much as possible in whatever you want to do. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to our channel. We'll see you in our next video. I'm Kate, 54 years old. According to my sister-in-law, I'm privileged, a person who doesn't know the struggles of ordinary people. I'll talk about that later. My husband is Aaron, also 54, the same age as me. We both work full-time during the week. We don't have any children. The reason my sister-in-law says I'm privileged and don't know the struggles of ordinary people is because the house I live in is in a very good location. It's near Chinatown in San Francisco. My grandfather built a house on his land, which my parents took over, and when they passed away, my husband and I moved from our apartment to live there. The sister-in-law who says you're so privileged is 46 years old, 8 years younger than me. This sister-in-law often comes to visit our house. Leaving her husband and 12-year-old child at home, she travels 2 hours from her home to visit us once every 3 months over the weekend. She says she likes Chinatown. This sister-in-law was born when my husband was in elementary school and he said she was small and cute. It seems that her parents loved her very much because she was born late. It must be nice, growing up in such a place without any struggles. She says this with a sense of inferiority. I was born in the countryside, so there were no places to play. You must have grown up comfortably without knowing such struggles. She clearly doesn't have friendly feelings towards me. But she seems to like Chinatown and comes to visit this house. Of course, she doesn't bring any gifts. Even if I bring a gift, you'll make fun of it because it's from the countryside. That's her reason. My sister-in-law comes empty-handed and says, "It must be nice, being so close to Chinatown. You don't have any struggles. You can live without a car. We country folks can't live without a car, so we have transportation costs. But your place is nice too, isn't it? I like it. The air is clean and the people around are kind." When I say this, what's that? Are you being sarcastic? She says things like that. I don't go out to play that much, because I work during the day. If I say this, you're really sarcastic. You want to say, unlike where you live, we're close to tourist spots, don't you? That's what she says. I want to say, who's being sarcastic? I've complained to my husband about her harsh words. My sister speaks her mind. She's straightforward. But he didn't take me seriously. So, in the midst of all this, I heard that my sister-in-law was building a house. She told me when she came to visit again. Really? Where? Sister-in-law said, it's obviously near our house. We bought the land ourselves. We didn't have it from the start like you. So there's no way we could buy such a good location. Rich person like you is nice. I was already irritated by her constant remarks, so I asked. So, how should I speak so that you don't feel like I'm being sarcastic? Why don't you just keep quiet? Everything you say sounds sarcastic. She said. I can't do anything but keep quiet. I was completely excluded from the conversation. Since then, she comes to visit but doesn't say a word to me. But she comes. She comes more often than before. Because my husband allows it. Hey, wait a minute. Your sister comes to our house but ignores me. She uses our bath. She eats our food. But I'm ignored. I tried saying this to my husband. Then. That's what I'm saying, she's straightforward. You don't have to talk either. She leaves her husband and child at home so we don't have to worry about them, right? So neither of us has to worry about each other. Even so. Today, she went out to explore San Francisco on her own, came back, used the bath as she pleased and went to bed. And the next day, she silently ate the breakfast I prepared and not even a word of thanks. Is this a hotel? Am I a hotel chef? So, 3 months later, my sister-in-law came again. It seems like she's going sightseeing in San Francisco today. But after that, she talked with my husband all night. She stayed overnight and left, but my husband was excited and showed me lots of pictures. Hey! Look at this. This is the house my sister built. Oh, the house was built. This? You'll love this when you see it. What he showed me was a pure white building. It certainly looked new. Isn't this amazing? My husband showed it to me with excitement. Huh? I tilted my head. At first glance, it looked like a garage. But looking at the mop in the picture with it, it was clear that it wasn't big enough for a car. Huh? Is this? That's right. Isn't it amazing? My husband shouted proudly. It's a motorcycle garage. And it's custom made. Now my Harley can fit in there. What? I was stunned. That's what I'm saying. My Harley can fit in there. I don't understand. But this is your sister's house, right? No, we've been talking about it for a while now. Let's exchange houses. What? I was surprised by the unexpected reply and development. I dropped the plate I was holding. My sister has been saying for a while now that she likes the location of this house and wants it. I've been saying that I don't like this house because it's old and has been around since your parents' time. So my sister said, then let's build a new one and exchange houses. So I had her build a special motorcycle garage so that my Harley could fit in. Wait. What? What is this? Without any consultation. I don't want to move out of this house. I don't really care about the other person's house. Or rather, I can't keep up with that much thinking. My husband started to get irritated, perhaps because my opposition was unexpected. From my point of view, his unexpected face was unexpected. Wait. What are you hesitating for? My sister and I have been discussing this for a long time. I understand that, but I didn't hear anything. I was being ignored. But think about it, there's only benefits. There's a motorcycle garage. Wait a minute, what about my position? Your hobby is watching suspense dramas, right? There's a TV in that house too. It's true that my husband's hobby is motorcycles. He cherishes his Harley Davidson as much as his life. Compared to that, I didn't have any particular hobbies, and if I had to say, I liked watching suspense dramas like Criminal Minds and A24 on TV. But, commuting. You just have to spend a little more time on the bus and train. That's not a little, it's an extra 2 hours. I can commute on my Harley. You should spend about 2 hours commuting. You've been gaining weight lately, so you should go on a forced diet. There's a limit to forced dieting. How painful it would be if it became a daily routine. But my husband's head was full of the new house and the dedicated garage to store his Harley. Just because I was lingering over this old house, he seemed to be getting really angry because it was unexpected and annoying. Finally, my husband resorted to drastic measures. I'll give my house to my sister and her husband. I'll get a new house with a motorcycle garage. I don't see any reason to refuse. If you refuse, we're getting a divorce. He started saying things like that. Huh? Divorce? Did you just say divorce? Are you going to push me that far? I thought. Okay, just give me one night to think about it. That was all I could say. I crawled into bed and I think I was in shock for about 2 hours. A house with a motorcycle garage seems like it was built for my husband. My sister-in-law doesn't have a motorcycle at her house. That means she built the house with the intention of taking over from the beginning. But when I thought about it, my husband, who agreed without thinking, was also at fault. And then, he decided on the deal without consulting me and said, if you refuse, we'll get divorced. This is clearly threatening. I won't forgive him. So I spent the next 8 hours until morning researching various things on my smartphone. The next day, I agreed to move out. I'll pack up, so wait 2 weeks. I have work on weekdays too. I added a condition. And one more thing. My sister-in-law and her husband can't move in until after we've moved out, right? I said. Well, yeah, and I want to hand it over in good condition as a thank you for making the garage, so can we hand it over after another 2 weeks? We'll have it cleaned by professionals and hand it over. My husband understood. I made 2 phone calls when my husband wasn't around. The 2 weeks flew by. My husband was happily packing his things, muttering, Harley, Harley. He was deciding on the furniture layout while asking my sister-in-law on the phone, how wide is that room? It seems there were also calls from her about the floor plan. Since they are moving from their current apartment, even 4 weeks of preparation for the move is quite short. They seem to be busy preparing for the move. And then, moving day. Hello? We're a white moving company. The movers arrived. Oh, please come in, this way. My husband invited the movers in. But immediately after that. Hello? We're a brown moving company. Another moving company arrived. What? My husband exclaimed. I slipped past my husband and said. Oh, please come in, this way. I invited the movers in. Wait a minute. What's going on? My husband yelled. What do you mean what's going on? I told you, didn't I? That it's okay to move. So let's move separately to our new homes. Movers, the items with yellow colored tape are the ones I want you to move, so please take them this way. The rest goes to Brown Moving Company. I briskly gave instructions. And an hour later. Well, that's it. Thank you for everything. I'll send you the divorce papers later. Wait a minute. My husband shouted in a panic. You said you wanted a divorce, didn't you? I left my husband behind and quickly left the scene in a taxi I had called. I got in the taxi, but it only took a few minutes to get to where I was going. Good work. The person waiting for the taxi came over to me. It was my brother Noah. My brother had come to help me move. Well, it's good that you found a house in 2 weeks. It's a rental though. You can look for an apartment or something once things settle down. You've had quite a misfortune. Misfortune is an understatement. For now, I've marked the necessary items for living like a rice cooker with yellow tape, so I'll manage somehow here. My brother helped me move. Even though the movers arranged the large items, I needed a man's help for the small details. I was saved. With my brother's help, the move was completed within the day. Well, then, call me again in 2 weeks. My brother left. Now, about the 2 weeks later, my brother mentioned. That is, 2 weeks after the day I moved. My phone rang. As expected. Hello? The voice on the other end was my sister-in-law. What's going on? I just listened silently. The house is gone. I looked down, suppressing a laugh. It was hard not to make a sound. It's just a vacant lot. Why are you silent? Because you told me to be quiet, didn't you? Ah! My sister-in-law screamed. I finally burst out laughing. It seemed that my sister-in-law and my husband were together. The phone was handed over to my husband. Did you have to go that far? He yelled at me in a voice that sounded like he was about to cry. I don't want to hear that from someone who threatened me. I really had a stomach ache from laughing so hard. Besides, I said I wanted to leave it clean, didn't I? That's not what clean means. It's the ultimate clean. It's brand new. My husband clicked his tongue repeatedly. Anyway, you come and talk. I have nothing to talk to you about. If you refuse, I won't stamp the divorce papers. You said you'd divorce me if I refused to leave that house, didn't you? What a turnaround. Shut up. Well then, I'll go to your house for now. But I'm scared to go alone, so I'll bring someone with me. With that, I contacted my brother. Is it my turn? Let's go. My reliable brother. Thank you all for gathering here today, and so on. My sister-in-law's husband, whom I hadn't seen since our wedding ceremony, started speaking as if it were a wedding ceremony. He seemed like a weak-willed man. Myself, my brother, my husband, my sister-in-law and her husband sat around the table in my husband's new home in a circle. The child was in the next room as expected. But even so, the scene in that room was spectacular. My sister-in-law came here triumphantly, but when she saw the vacant lot where her house used to be, she was stunned. But she had already cancelled her apartment lease and couldn't go back. So she hastily moved her belongings into the new house that my husband was supposed to move into. As a result, there were 2 of everything, 2 cupboards, 2 tables, and the space was incredibly cramped. Having 2 of everything was creepy. Why would you demolish it? Isn't that too much of a provocation against me? That's right. Is this some kind of provocation? There's a limit to being mean. My brother and sister yelled at each other. I laughed. The land and house were inherited by me. It originally belonged to my grandfather, so I can do whatever I want with it. Huh? My husband flinched. My brother helped me. In other words, my sister inherited that land and house. So it's her personal property and doesn't become part of your shared property with her. In other words, you don't have the right to decide to give it to your sister in the first place. Huh? What? Both my sister-in-law and husband were taken aback by this unexpected development. If you had told me that earlier. Are you blaming me? If she's being threatened with divorce by her husband and being ignored by her sister-in-law, she can't say anything. My brother said it for me. So, I decided to demolish that house and sell the land because it's too big for me to live alone after the divorce. Yes, the day after I was threatened with divorce, I called 2 places. One was my brother, and the other was a demolition contractor. They told me it would take 10 days to demolish the house. It takes my sister-in-law 2 hours to get here, 4 hours round trip. If she doesn't have much time to prepare for the move, she won't be able to come because she'll be busy packing. The same goes for my husband, who moved into a new building near my sister-in-law's apartment. So when I actually moved, I was able to make a big counterattack by turning it into a vacant lot. Stop it. We lost our house, you know? And we had to pay for moving twice because we had to move into your brother's house for now since our house was gone. I don't care. You could have been sued for trespassing on my property without permission, couldn't you? You're lucky you didn't become a criminal because it became a vacant lot. I laughed at her. And then to my husband. Is a woman who talks about such small amounts of money straightforward? Don't make me laugh. My brother said. Ignoring is not straightforward, it's damp. My sister-in-law's husband, who had been silent all along, interjected. Sister-in-laws, so, you're saying that this discussion progressed without your sister-in-law's permission? That's right. Besides, my sister-in-law told me to shut up, and my husband threatened me, so they were both getting carried away on their own. I exposed them. Then, my sister-in-law's husband, who had seemed timid until a moment ago, started to tremble. Sister-in-laws, hey, what do you mean? What's wrong? She probably hadn't seen him get so angry before. My sister-in-law was clearly flustered. Sister-in-law. My sister-in-law's husband continued. Sister-in-laws, she told me that we were going to get your brother's house and move. She said if you refuse, we'll get divorced. What? All siblings said similar things. I thought I was going to have a stomach ache from laughing so hard. This is definitely going to be muscle pain tomorrow. Sister-in-laws, but I'm a home-based SC, so I can live anywhere, and I thought it would be pitiful for our child if her mother wasn't there, so I allowed it. But now that it's come to this, she's too selfish and I think it's bad for our child. And as you pointed out, my sister-in-law's husband took a breath before telling my sister-in-law. Sister-in-laws, what you said was a threatening thought. And finally, sister-in-laws, we're done too. I'll protect and raise our child. I'll take your threat as of a proposal. He said. Well then, let me say it again. I also gave my husband a final blow. I accept that as a proposal. We're really over now. Goodbye. Wait. If the house is gone, the situation has changed. That's right. It's strange to cut off unilaterally when the situation has changed. The siblings started screaming together. My sister-in-law's husband and I waved our hands together. Sister-in-laws, you created this strange situation on your own, got carried away, and now it's just back to normal. My sister-in-law's husband said. So, what happened in the end was that my sister-in-law's husband and I each hired a lawyer and we each went through mediation divorce. It seems that my sister-in-law's husband got custody of the child and the newly built house that my sister-in-law built. My sister-in-law, who was extravagant and went out to Chinatown once every 3 months. Her child seemed to have been lonely because she left the child alone even on weekends. The father started to take care of the child because he became a single parent, and the child was better off this way. The child seems to be saying that is happy because her father is there for her. The reason why the new house was given to my sister-in-law's ex-husband is because my sister-in-law did not have enough income to pay the loan. It's amazing that she can go to Chinatown once every 3 months and spend money extravagantly with such a lack of income. In the end, her spending habits did not change and I heard that she is in debt. The motorcycle garage is going to be demolished and the layout will be changed a little to make it a parking lot. As for my ex-husband, he had been working together until now, so he didn't have enough money to invest in Harley after being kicked out of my house. He was taken a lot in the property division and had to let go of his Harley. He lost his hobby by losing his Harley, lashed out at his lawyer, became desperate in life and started drinking heavily. I turned the site of the house I demolished into a parking lot. Because it's close to Chinatown, I was able to charge a high parking fee and get a regular income from it. With that as my capital, I ended up buying an apartment. It's a one-person apartment, so the layout is small, but it's comfortable because of that. I sat down in front of the big screen TV with a grin on my face. Today is the day 24 is broadcast on TV. The moment when I can watch it without being disturbed by anyone with a beer in hand is the best. I've already taken a bath, so it's the strongest set of no makeup, pajamas, beer, big screen, and a 24. I set up some cheese snacks, buried myself in the sofa and pressed the button on the TV remote control.
Your land is my land LOL. We've already started construction LOL.
What? That land is... As I opened my mouth in surprise, my mother-in-law interrupted me with a shrill voice. She said,
"We don't need a wife who talks back to her husband. Just say you understand."
I didn't know what to say to my mother-in-law, who was looking smug. That land has already been leased to a company, and a new apartment building is planned to be built. The land fee is scheduled to be transferred next month. I thought I had told Steve about it. Mother-in-law, that land is... Every time I tried to tell the truth, my mother-in-law would interrupt me with a shrill voice, saying,
"That's enough. You just need to keep quiet. Got it?
I finally yelled, I understand. As I looked at my satisfied-looking in-laws and husband, I cursed them in my heart. Just wait and see. I can't wait to see you cry. My name is Mary. I'm a 45-year-old housewife. I've been a French language instructor for 23 years, taking advantage of the experience I gained from studying abroad for about 2 years during college. I have a fulfilling life interacting with many students every day. My husband Steve is also 45 years old. He became a student at the French language school, and that's how we met. Although I had no intention of getting involved with a student, I rejected all his advances while he was enrolled in the school. However, after he left the school, he persistently pursued me and we started dating. Steve was very gentlemanly during our dates, and our relationship progressed smoothly. We dated for about 2 years and he proposed to me. We got married when we were 30 years old. However, as soon as we got married, Steve's attitude changed completely. At first, we fought a lot, but I didn't have the physical or mental stamina to fight every day. In the end, I gave in more often than not, and it became the norm. Steve has a younger sister named Lori who is 5 years younger than him. She seemed to avoid coming home often. When I met her, she seemed like a brisk woman, but Steve said she was a selfish person who couldn't be accommodated because she was cheeky despite being a woman. As a result, I had little to do with Lori, and even after several years of marriage, I only saw her at New Year's parties. Even after 10 years of marriage and turning 40, Steve and I were unable to have children. We were told by our parents-in-law to get tested at an obstetrics and gynecology clinic, but there was nothing wrong with my body. However, as soon as I reported it, Steve yelled at me with a devilish face.
What? Are you saying it's my fault?
I stammered, no, that's not what I meant, but Steve was already furious and threw the remote control against the wall next to me.
Don't get carried away. I'm never going to the hospital. You're the one who's weird. Let's change hospitals. Don't ever go there again. Got it?
Steve then left home with only his wallet and smartphone. I picked up the broken remote control and cried. I thought to myself many times that this wasn't the married life I had dreamed of, but maybe I didn't choose divorce because of my fond memories of kind Steve. When I was 43 years old, my parents-in-law told me that having a child at an advanced age was bad for appearances, and I gave up on having children. When I told Steve about it, he just said,
Huh.
He didn't seem to care much, and I realized for the first time that I was the only one who was worried. My and Steve's residence is located about a 5-minute walk from my in-laws' house, and they used to visit us about 3 times a week. To be honest, I didn't like my in-laws very much. My mother-in-law kept making sarcastic comments, and my father-in-law kept talking about my appearance and nightlife.
You know, some important person said that as you get older, your eggs deteriorate or something like that. I'm not saying that Mary's eggs are deteriorating or anything. But once you're over 40, you know? If something happens, it'll be a nuisance for us too, right?
Well, even if they're deteriorating, Mary's style is still attractive, so Steve should be able to enjoy it too.
Gross, Dad.
No one would feel good when vulgar conversations are taking place in front of them. While silently serving tea, I hoped that my in-laws would leave quickly.
You know, I gave birth to Steve when I was 20 and to Lori when I was 25. Oh, it's not like being young is everything, but it's true that younger women recover faster after childbirth, right?
Yuri's still young too, Mom.
No, I mean, compared to Steve's classmates' mothers, I might be younger.
With just a little flattery, my mother-in-law was in a good mood and I forced myself to smile. My mother-in-law was proud of having given birth to Steve at a young age and liked to assert that she was younger than those around her. When someone denied or didn't agree with her, she would treat them coldly as if they were in the wrong. As a result, every time I met her, I had to flatter her and go along with her silent assertion that to be honest, my mother-in-law's appearance is not very good. She is an ordinary grandma with medium build, natural perm, and looks that would make you believe she is over 70 years old. However, she doesn't seem to realize it and thinks she's a diamond in the rough, almost like a beautiful witch.
Well, it's sad that I can't see my cute grandchild, but it's better than increasing the number of useless people, right?
Yeah, that's right. If we don't have children, they'll take care of us.
The living room was filled with vulgar words even though it was my own house, making me feel very uncomfortable. And my in-laws left after saying what they wanted to say and feeling refreshed. One day, I received a call from my father. He informed me that my paternal grandfather had passed away and that I would also receive an inheritance. My father's ancestral home was a well-known family in the area. Since my father was the youngest of 6 siblings and had no particular inheritance to receive, he had lived his life doing what he wanted. As a result, my family wasn't particularly wealthy. However, since I was the only one who could be called a grandchild in my father's family line, my grandfather seemed to have left me some land. The content of the inheritance was cash that included expenses necessary to inherit the land and other costs. I thought for a moment that it was a dream to have enough money to live on even after paying inheritance tax. However, the land itself was too large to build a house on, and I didn't have the confidence to use it well. When I consulted my father about this, he suggested lending it to a company that wanted to build an apartment. I wouldn't have to worry about management and other issues, and I would receive enough money to live my life as I pleased just from the rent. Since it wasn't something that was originally planned to be inherited and wasn't a land that anyone in the family had any attachment to, lending it to a company was decided easily. I told Steve about it. He seemed lost in thought for a moment but said,
I see.
And started reading his book alone again. I thought that was the end of our conversation, but it turned out that Steve had made another plan on his own, which would come to light one day. One holiday, my in-laws came to my house as usual. While I was cleaning up the kitchen alone, Steve suddenly called out to me while snacking on the tea and sweets I had prepared for him and my in-laws.
Your land is my land, lol. I've already requested construction work, lol.
What? That land is. I opened my mouth in surprise, but my mother-in-law raised her voice as if to interrupt me.
I don't need a daughter-in-law who talks back to her husband. Just say I understand.
I didn't know what to say to my triumphant-looking mother-in-law. The land had already been lent to a company, and a new apartment building was planned to be built there. The rent for the land is scheduled to be deposited next month. I thought I had told Steve about it too. Mother-in-law, that land is.
That's why. You just need to keep quiet. Got it?
Every time I tried to tell the truth, my mother-in-law would scream and interrupt me. Finally, I lost my patience. I understand. As I looked at my satisfied-looking in-laws and husband, I cursed them in my heart. Just wait and see. It'll be fun to see you cry. I decided to do something that I had been unable to do for a long time. I renewed my passport, which I hadn't updated for years, and contacted a friend who lives abroad. My friend was very surprised when I told them about this, but they agreed to help me. It was a bit difficult to proceed with the plan carefully until the time limit when Steve would find out about that land, but it was fun as long as I thought it was for my own bright future. When everything was ready, Steve received a timely call from the construction company about the land. One day, when I returned from work, Steve was standing at the entrance with an angry face like a demon.
Did you deceive me?
With that one word, I understood what Steve was talking about. While desperately trying to tighten my cheeks that were about to loosen, I answered Steve. What are you talking about? Steve seemed to be very upset with my words. He glared at me while trembling with anger.
It's about that land. The construction company contacted me. They said they couldn't accept the request because they were already working on another construction project.
Is that so? But I think I told you about it.
What? Isn't it your duty as a wife to follow what I decided? Stop the construction plan for the apartment immediately. Didn't I say, I understand?
I sighed because of his selfish argument and my work fatigue. Steve grabbed my collar and threatened me. However, it wasn't scary for me anymore because I had already prepared myself. It's impossible. Because that land has already been lent to a company.
What?
Didn't we talk about it? The land is under my name, but the building on that land is under the name of the company. It's called a leasehold right. I receive rent for the land but don't get involved in the building. I explained it to you properly, but you didn't understand. Steve seemed not to understand and let go of my hand with a blank expression. While looking straight at Steve, I continued speaking. So let's get divorced.
What? Why would we do that? Are you serious?
Finally realizing that I was quietly angry, Steve began to panic suddenly. While looking at his pathetic figure out of the corner of my eye, I moved to the living room. Steve followed me while watching my behavior from behind, and he looked smaller than me even though he was bigger.
Hey, Mary, I'll respect your plan this time, so please reconsider the divorce.
Even so, I looked at Steve with contempt for his condescending attitude. Steve was completely frightened by my gaze. Why do I have to respect what you decided about the land I inherited from my family?
No.
You seem to be misunderstanding something. You don't have any right to interfere with my land that I inherited. Steve listened to me for a while but immediately bit back when he heard that he had no rights.
You're being disrespectful to your husband. Who do you think is feeding you?
Oh, all living expenses and housing expenses are split in half, so I live on my own money.
What?
Didn't you notice? Were you really not interested? I took out my household account book and opened this month's page. Steve and I put in $700 each for living expenses, and I paid separately for the rent of the room we lived in and public utilities from my account. In other words, even though we said it was split in half, I paid more money. As you can see, I can live on my own, and I'm wasting money just by being with you.
That's a lie.
But you get more than $1,330 as pocket money every month. But since we got married, you've only put in $700 into our home.
My mother said that was enough.
I knew it. This mama's boy is so annoying.
Mama's boy?
Steve seemed upset by my words and rolled his eyes. From an outsider's perspective, Steve is a great mama's boy who talks to his mother about everything and accepts her support as a matter of course. However, he seemed to have no self-awareness at all. Anyway, if you're going to keep living there, please pay for it yourself from now on. I've already changed the account for automatic withdrawal. I won't pay a single penny after today because I'm leaving here today.
Hey, what do you mean by leaving?
Ignoring Steve's words, I took out a suitcase that I had prepared in advance from the closet and headed for the entrance. Actually, the luggage had already been carried out. I had been carrying it out little by little so that he wouldn't notice it, but Steve didn't notice it at all. He wasn't interested in me at all. It was a bit sad but honestly convenient. Steve followed me to the entrance and looked at me while being flustered. In response, I took off my wedding ring in front of him and placed it on top of the counter.
Are you really leaving? You'll regret it.
I replied, "You'll regret it if we keep living together."
What about my food?
I said, "What? Prepare it yourself." I was completely amazed that Steve was still worried about food at this point. Steve had a very natural expression, but when I replied with a word, he was very surprised and froze with a surprised face. I didn't want to look at Steve's face for even a second, so I left the house where I had lived for 15 years. For several days, I was busy preparing for the future and running around for various procedures. Then, my mother-in-law called me. I answered the phone even though I was annoyed, and I could hear her high-pitched voice over the phone.
Hey. What's this about a condominium being built on that land? And you're divorcing Steve? We've been childless for 3 years and you're leaving us after 15 years of endurance? How ungrateful.
Mother-in-law, the condominium was already decided from the beginning. And Steve and I are getting divorced because we couldn't build trust, and Steve didn't cooperate with infertility treatment.
That child is healthy.
It's strange. I am too. My mother-in-law screamed a key over the phone in frustration at my words, and I found it a little funny that someone could scream like that in a manga.
Anyway, we'll demand compensation from you. It's punishment for deceiving us and making us sad. You must pay for it.
Steve is annoying me with his constant talk about it. Steve will pay you back, so please keep sticking to him forever. Also, Steve is the one who has to pay compensation, so don't run away because a lawyer will contact you later.
What? You're a daughter-in-law.
My mother-in-law continued to scream, but I hung up the phone without caring. It was surprising even to myself that I could say so much when I was fed up with everything. But it felt very refreshing, and I felt like something that had been weighing on my chest for years had become a little lighter. After a month of leaving the house, we finally decided to discuss the divorce. The basic conditions were already decided according to the lawyer, but he said he wouldn't stamp the divorce papers unless I met him. So I reluctantly reserved a restaurant as a place for discussion. My in-laws had stubbornly insisted on their own home as the meeting place, but I refused and reserved a restaurant with a private room. When my in-laws and Steve arrived at the meeting place, they were smiling unnaturally, and I had a feeling that they were up to something.
Mary, it's been a while. How have you been?
I've been good, thank you. As I said that, my mother-in-law approached me with a smile and a cat-like voice.
I'm sorry for everything so far, Mary. Let's talk about the future from now on.
Yes, let's. With those words, I somehow understood the content of my in-laws and Steve's scheme. They probably wanted me to pay them a portion of the land rent or something like that in exchange for the divorce. And as expected, my mother-in-law mentioned the inheritance I received as soon as she sat down.
Hey, do you know the current value of that land over there?
Well,
I was surprised. And you're getting money from other sources too, aren't you? We need to split the property properly.
I laughed at her petty words. My mother-in-law was initially stunned by my laughter, but soon glared at me with a red face.
What's so funny?
Mother-in-law, didn't you know? The inheritance I received is not shared property between spouses.
What?
My mother-in-law screamed in disbelief and opened her eyes wide. It seemed that she had not researched such basic things because she was blinded by the amount of money involved.
Then we won't get a single penny.
That's right. My words were followed by an inaudible scream from my mother-in-law before she slumped down weakly. Judging from my mother-in-law's attire, she intended to use my inheritance to live a life of luxury. It was good evidence that she was saying, "What should we do about payment?"
Don't you want to support your husband's family as his wife?
I gave him a cold look in response to my father-in-law's words that he had been silent about until now. Then I pressed the button on my smartphone without saying anything. From there, my father-in-law's vulgar words flowed out of the phone.
What?
I don't need any of you. I'm living my own life.
Do you think you can get away with that selfishness?
I can even go to court if you want. It's just evidence to submit.
If you do that, my position will be.
Well, it will be socially difficult for you. My father-in-law couldn't say anything back and slumped down like my mother-in-law. When the noisy outsiders finally stopped, I looked at Steve. Steve had a white face, but suddenly had a look as if he had thought of something.
It must be hard for you to manage the money alone, so I'll help you. You can do whatever you want.
I don't know why I have to be involved with you even after divorce. Besides, there are people who will think about how to use the inheritance with me. Come in. When I called out, the door opened and a woman entered. Steve was surprised and opened his eyes wide when he saw her.
Lori.
Long time no see, big brother.
Actually, while I was working on the plan with my friend abroad, I found out that Lori had a connection with that friend according to what I heard from my friend. My in-laws were very harsh on Lori while pampering Steve. Steve didn't object to their treatment of Lori and even showed his cunning side by blaming her for what he did in the end. Steve went to a private high school and university, but Lori was only allowed to go to a public high school and didn't receive any financial support for college, so Lori worked to pay for her own tuition and became a freelance writer after graduation. However, when she started working and got on track, my in-laws began to contact her persistently, asking her to support their family. It was surprising when they said they were wary of us because that period coincided with when Steve and I got married. Since then, Lori and I have been in touch many times, and all the tension has disappeared. We have become close enough to call each other best friends. Lori and I have become very close, and she will help me with my French language school abroad from now on.
Abroad? What can you do overseas?
Did you forget my profession? I originally studied abroad for 2 years and spoke French with native speakers every day at work. I have no problem using French, and if I hadn't married you, I would have gone overseas much earlier.
What about me? I can't speak French.
Do you understand what divorce means? It means that I'm going to stop living with you.
Oh.
Steve finally seemed to understand the situation and turned pale. When I received the completed divorce papers from Steve, who had become silent, I left the three of them sitting there and left the restaurant with Lori and a lawyer. I submitted the divorce papers to the city hall and moved overseas. Since my belongings had already been sent to my new home, I was able to start my new life without any problems. I share a room with Lori and we respect each other's work. Lori is becoming a popular freelance writer by writing overseas columns and writing articles about France for local publishers. Actually, Lori's dream is to be a novelist, and I'm thinking that I need to work hard when I see her working hard on stories in between jobs. Steve lived in the apartment where I lived for a while, but he had no savings because he had been playing around until then. He couldn't afford to pay rent and pay me alimony, so he ended up having to leave. He returned to his parents' house, but his in-laws, who no longer received money from Lori, ate up most of his salary, leaving him with no money and doing all the housework that his mother-in-law had abandoned every day. Apparently, my in-laws also need to let go of their house soon because they can't afford it. A large number of messages asking Lori for money were coming in, but Lori smiled and said, "Go to hell," and hung up the phone. I think my mother-in-law, who is still 65 years old, should work, but there are few places that would hire a mother-in-law who has never worked before. Rather, I don't think my mother-in-law will choose to work, so it's likely that my in-laws' house will disappear in the near future. I am running a French language school, which was my dream, and it is thriving. The students are very enthusiastic and full of hope that they will go to France someday. Now, let's study greetings today. Today, too, I stand at the lectern with a smile. I love myself now, who can confidently say that the future is full of hope. My parents divorced when I entered college. By the time I was old enough to understand, their relationship had already cooled down, and I spent my childhood pretending to be part of a fake family. My father, who was popular with women, married my mother because I was born. He often said that if I hadn't been born, he wouldn't have married her, and he didn't even try to hide his infidelity. On the other hand, my mother, who was pregnant with me, was forced to drop out of college by her grandparents and was forced to become a housewife. She resented this and cried every time my father cheated on her, but she wouldn't let me get close to her. As a result, I grew up as a cold child, so when my father and mother divorced, I thought it was a good thing. I explained that if I could get the tuition and half of the living expenses for my 4 years of college at once, I would be independent from then on. My father went to his new wife and children. My mother went abroad. Now I live with my husband, who is 4 years older than me, and my 3-year-old daughter. My husband was originally my senior at the same company. For me, who had a bad past, I expected that my relationship with him would not last long. However, he tried to date me as an equal, and I felt like I understood the feeling of liking someone for the first time. When he proposed, I was happy, but I was more scared. However, my in-laws quickly dispelled my worries. My in-laws are my parents-in-law and my sister-in-law of the same age as me. My father-in-law is a stepfather to my husband. If I tell them that there is a low possibility that both of my parents will attend the wedding even if I get married, and that I am estranged from both sides of my relatives. My father-in-law said, well, then I can walk down the Virgin Road with you. And he laughed off. My mother-in-law also said, I don't care about the form, what's important to me is whether my son will be happy or not. So, he and I got married. Our daughter was born in the 3rd year of our marriage. During that time, my husband changed jobs once and started a business with a friend of my sister-in-law's. Now, he is busy every day as a co-representative of a travel company. At the recommendation of my parents-in-law, I help with the accounting of the company run by my father-in-law. It is a company that my father-in-law and his ex-wife started, but she passed away due to illness. My childless father-in-law devoted himself to running the company as a memento of his wife. Now, it has grown to the point where it has its own building in New York. As a relative of the president, I work hard without relying on him. My father-in-law advised me that it was tough from starting up the company to getting it on track. So, I do everything at home and say to my husband, we're okay, so take care of your body. Then, my husband said, sorry. I'll take care of my body too. The company grew rapidly. Since then, my husband's return home has only been delayed. Until then, we used to go to my parents-in-law's house together once a month, but we hardly go there anymore. I think we should go there even a little because we found out that my mother-in-law is seriously ill. After her husband and my sister-in-law's father died in an accident, my mother-in-law raised her children alone and ran a restaurant. After that, she remarried my father-in-law. My mother-in-law chose palliative care immediately. My father-in-law persuaded her, don't give up on surgery. However, in the end, she said, please let me decide how to use my remaining time. I reported it to my husband, but he just said, if mom decided, neither my sister nor I have the right to interfere. I thought he was respecting my mother-in-law's wishes, but my husband began to be reluctant to visit my mother-in-law who was receiving home care. He was also easily swayed by my sister-in-law. Every time I visit my parents-in-law with my daughter, my mother-in-law glances behind us to see if my husband is coming. It hurts me. My father-in-law also looks painful. And when my daughter innocently says, Daddy hasn't played with me lately, my mother-in-law says a little sadly, yes, he's a bad dad. I have to scold him a lot when I see him next time. I also feel sad. One late night, my father-in-law contacted me to say that my mother-in-law's condition had suddenly worsened and she had been taken to the hospital by ambulance. I quickly woke up my daughter and emailed my husband, but he didn't reply. Even when I rushed to the hospital by taxi, only my father-in-law was there. I wondered why this was happening at this time, but even when I called the company, it was on the answering machine, and my anxiety only increased. Soon after, the doctor told us that my mother-in-law had passed away. Then, I returned to my parents-in-law's house with my mother-in-law. About 2 hours later, my husband and sister-in-law rushed in. At that time, many employees from my father-in-law's company had come to help and offer condolences, and they all looked coldly at my husband, who had messy hair and was clearly hungover, and my sister-in-law, who was wearing a flashy dress. I don't even feel like talking to them. Then, the two of them made excuses, but my angry father-in-law said, that's enough. I don't want to shout in front of my wife. Shut up. They were scared by his cold words and the looks of those around him and huddled in the corner of the room. It seems that my mother-in-law had been discussing the details of her funeral with a friendly funeral home for some time. It seems that the news of her death had reached many people who mourned her, and many people attended the funeral. Even during that time, my husband and sister-in-law just sat there and didn't seem to care about the looks of those around them. 10 days after the funeral, I received an express delivery on my day off. The sender was a law firm. Inside was a sealed letter and an envelope with the name of the law firm. The envelope contained a letter from my mother-in-law, who had asked to send it to me after about 10 days had passed since her death. She had entrusted the letter to the law firm. She wrote that I should read it so that her children would not notice it, and then wrote an address. I took the key that was enclosed and hurried to the address designated for my daughter and me. What I saw there was beyond my expectations. After that, my husband, sister-in-law, my daughter, and I were told by my father-in-law to come to his house. We sat on the living room sofa. Then, my father-in-law called and there was a knock on the door. 2 men in suits entered the living room. My husband and sister-in-law looked suspiciously at the men, but their faces lit up when they were handed a business card from the law firm. The 2 lawyers turned to all of us and said, "We will now read the will of the deceased. I would like to inform you in advance that this will is a legally valid will." After that, they read the will. My mother-in-law's property was the ownership of the building and restaurant that she bought and built, as well as savings, but the savings were given to my father-in-law, and the remaining ownership of the building and restaurant, as well as a life insurance policy of $100,000, were to be given to my husband and sister-in-law. The amount of savings was about $200,000, but the real estate value of the building would far exceed that. Originally, the inheritance rights were divided equally between my father-in-law and my husband and sister-in-law, but my husband and sister-in-law looked at my father-in-law with a flicker of their eyes. My father-in-law said, "I have no objection to that." They signed the inheritance division agreement with a relieved expression. Then, we talked about the distribution of other personal belongings of my mother-in-law. My sister-in-law, who was excited about getting the building, said, "What? Mother's personal belongings? That's antiques and so on, right? I don't need those old-fashioned things." So I said, "May I have them? I want to pass them down to my daughter as a memento of her." She agreed. Furthermore, I had a consent form prepared by the lawyer to allow me, a third party, to receive the personal belongings, and I got the signatures of the 3 members of my family. My husband and sister-in-law laughed and said it was exaggerated, but I stopped them from leaving and handed the divorce papers to my husband. "I never thought you would ask for a divorce here and now. You have been making excuses for work and having an affair with your sister's friend who is a co-entrepreneur. I have evidence that I have secured through a private investigation company. My request is for custody of our daughter, alimony, and a lump sum payment of child support. I don't need any property division." I handed him a list of the calculated amounts of alimony and child support and the divorce agreement that I had prepared with the help of a lawyer. Suddenly, my husband said, "What? If you knew, I didn't have to put on an act." He laughed. My sister-in-law also said, "You're right. You're surprisingly wicked." I was also quite busy carrying the burden of my brother's affair. The 2 of them kept laughing. I ignored them and signed the papers when prompted by the lawyer. He promised to transfer the money tomorrow. I told my husband that the important items among the apartment's belongings had already been moved to another location and that he could dispose of the remaining items when I vacated the room. I then asked, "I have custody of our daughter, but what about visitation rights?" My husband replied, "I don't need to hide it anymore. My child will be born over there soon. So, is it okay for our daughter to say goodbye here, with a smirk?" I was about to explode with anger, but my father-in-law calmly said, "Then, it would be better to add that as an additional item in the agreement and get a signature." I followed his advice. My husband and sister-in-law tried to leave. My husband said, "Well, listen to your mother and take care of yourself." He waved his hand and left without looking back. My father-in-law patted my head as I hugged my daughter, who looked puzzled. After that, I confirmed that the promised compensation and child support had been deposited and submitted the divorce papers. I tried to rent a room for me and my daughter to live in, but my father-in-law said, "We have no legal relationship, but would you like to live here together? You won't have to pay rent." It's true that if we live here, the stress on my daughter and the change in environment will be minimized. However, I was hesitant to rely on him so much, but I agreed to take care of the housework in exchange for the rent. My daughter is happy to live with her beloved grandpa, and my father-in-law is also smiling, saying, "My wife must be happy somewhere." I can hear my grandchild's laughter in this house. I do feel her presence and feel protected here. On the other hand, my ex-husband and ex-sister-in-law sold the ownership of the store to the person in charge of each store and were looking forward to changing the name of the building. However, when they actually went through the procedure, they found out that a kind of mortgage had been set on that building, and that my late mother-in-law had raised funds for business expansion. Furthermore, it turned out that the current debtor of that building was not the original bank, but a finance company with many suspicious rumors, and that my mother-in-law had been delaying repayment for about 6 months before her death. If they want to sell the building as planned, they will have to negotiate with the finance company on how and when to repay the remaining debt, and go through complicated procedures. In addition, the travel company, which seemed to be going well, was actually in the red due to the loose financial sense of my ex-husband and his executives, so they couldn't raise such funds. As a result, incidents, fraudsters, and land developers disguised as financial companies that flocked to financial companies and real estate that seemed to be profitable, they lost the rights to the building, and the travel company went bankrupt. He was also abandoned by their affair partners, and the $100,000 from my mother-in-law's life insurance disappeared immediately as a lump sum payment for compensation and child support, and as repayment for borrowed money. Well, they still have debt, so it's negative. 2 people who had fallen into despair and were not accepted by anyone came to this house to cling to me and my father-in-law. However, my father-in-law said, "Your relationship with me was cut off when my wife died. It doesn't matter, don't come again." When I said the same thing. "I divorced you, so you are a stranger. You have no use, because you gave up visitation rights." They looked hopeless. Nevertheless, my ex-sister-in-law persisted. "Then return the memento that ma'am gave you at that time. I can get some money by selling it." I told them to take them as they wished when I brought them. They both started to carry them with a different look in their eyes. At that time, I also showed them the notebook that my mother-in-law had left behind. "I don't need such a thing," she said, and left with my mother-in-law's memento. Actually, the most valuable thing that my mother-in-law left behind was this notebook. Following the memo in the notebook, I went to a place and found a trunk room. When I opened the room with the key in the notebook, there was a small suitcase, and inside it was evidence of my ex-husband's affair that I had investigated by a private investigation company and a long letter. My mother-in-law seemed to have realized that my ex-husband and ex-sister-in-law's business was fragile and that one of the causes was his affair. And when she realized that her life was not long, she was most concerned about the future of me and my daughter, who had no one to rely on. I can't forgive the betrayal of the children I raised so hard. My late husband, the father of my sons, repeated his infidelity during his lifetime, and I cried about it many times. The children who should have known that will do the same thing as their real father. My mother-in-law, who wrote that, wanted to pass on the inheritance to me and my daughter without any trouble after her death, and at the same time, set up a mortgage with a notorious finance company to get back at her children. She seems to have intentionally delayed the repayment of the money raised by the mortgage on the building. I thought about depositing this letter in a bank safe deposit box, but there is a risk of freezing it as soon as I die, and my children may find it at that time. I'm glad you're reading this notebook. And I hope you and my grandchild will live happily. I couldn't stop crying after reading the letter that ended with that. I showed the letter to my father-in-law, but my mother-in-law had apparently arranged for the same letter to be sent to my father-in-law. Knowing everything, my father-in-law decided to participate in the plan for my mother-in-law, and we accomplished everything according to the plot she drew. While greeting my mother-in-law's photo with my daughter, I spoke to her in my heart. "Mother-in-law, you are an irreplaceable mother-in-law to me forever." My father-in-law's eyes were also moist. While looking back at my mother-in-law's photo again, I said in a loud voice this time, "I'm off. Hurry up or you'll be late." He said. My eyes were also moist. "I'll divorce you, such a useless poor one without money." Saying that, Matthew leaves a divorce notice and goes out. I stare blankly at the divorce notice while lying on a hospital bed. I had been suspicious for a long time. However, I never thought he was really cheating on me. Moreover, he impregnated her. Am I, who is hospitalized and unable to earn money, a useless person to be thrown away? Mom? I raised my eyes in surprise at the voice of my precious son, and there were Thomas and my father standing there. My father frowned as he looked at what I had. "What are you going to do?" "That's already decided." I discharged myself from the hospital a little earlier than necessary and headed to the bank where Matthew was. My father, who drove me back and forth in the car, said do your best to me and dropped me off in front of the bank before going somewhere else. If I enter the bank with those feet, I can see Matthew frowning when he notices me. Coincidentally, there are no other customers in front of Matthew. I approach Matthew straight ahead. I will cancel all employees' accounts. Huh? Now, let's make it clear who has angered whose daughter. I smiled wickedly in contrast to Matthew, who turned pale. My name is Margaret Diaz. I am 32 years old and a company executive. I am a mother of one child. I have a 7-year-old son named Thomas and a husband named Matthew. Matthew and I met at a matchmaking party hosted by mutual friends during our college years. At that time, we were not interested in each other and were only acquaintances who exchanged contact information. Oh. You're Margaret from the party, right? Yes, Matthew. The following year, we met again by chance when I used the bank where he worked. As a result, we started to keep in touch frequently and started dating. Then we got married because I became pregnant with Thomas. Matthew is famous for his serious and polite work ethic. Therefore, he was envied by his friends. I myself am glad that I could marry such a person. Mom, why is this like this? Wait a minute. I don't know much about it either, so I'll look it up now. Thomas is curious like Matthew and studies hard. He asks me every day why this is so and why that is so I'm studying every day too. Surprisingly, what Thomas admires is not Matthew but my father. My mother passed away due to illness, so my father raised me alone while working hard. Sorry, but I still don't like your father. Well, there's nothing you can do about it. Don't tell him that. He's quite concerned about it. There's no way I'm going to tell him. My father is a kind person but looks tough and scary. Matthew also dislikes my father's appearance. My father himself was concerned about it and tried not to interfere more than necessary. Therefore, we were able to lead a peaceful life at first. A smooth life. However, that changed as soon as we got married. Hey, where did you put my cell phone? Don't say it like that. Isn't it still charging? Matthew visits me early in the morning with an unhappy look on his face. Actually, Matthew's cell phone was still plugged into the charger when he went to bed last night. There was no apology or thanks for that fact, and I get more irritated by his clicking tongue than he does. Matthew changed after we got married. He always says things like, I'm an elite banker. You can live without inconvenience because of me. However, Matthew doesn't put any money into the house or anything like that. Despite using his salary only for himself, he seems to think that he is supporting the house himself. In reality, it is me who supports our household finances. All utility bills and food expenses are paid by me. Hey, what's this new outfit? It's Thomas's clothes. They don't fit him anymore. Don't be extravagant with my money. I'm paying for it with my salary. I don't have your bank book. Despite this, he complains as soon as we go out to eat or buy new clothes on holidays. It seems that he doesn't like us being extravagant, no matter how small. On the other hand, my father is someone who doesn't spare money for us. This apartment is too small. So I bought the apartment that Matthew wanted to live in. I can be near you even if we don't live together. He bought the apartment with a smile like that and gave us the top floor as a gift. And in case of emergency, he lives on a different floor of the same apartment building. Mom, can I go to Grandpa's house? Sure. But don't stay too late just because it's the same apartment building. Come back before it gets dark. Okay. It may be natural for Thomas to be attached to his grandfather rather than his father, Matthew. If there is time, Thomas goes to his father. Where's Thomas? He's with his father. By the way, Matthew never complains to his father. And he seems to avoid telling Thomas to his father because he doesn't want to be told on. He's only tough with me. If it were me, I would keep my mouth shut so as not to cause trouble for my father. Well, if you're just going to complain, you can ignore it lightly. That's how I thought about it lightly. Because of that, Matthew doesn't participate in child rearing at all. Carol called me and I'm going out for a bit. Huh? Again? And Carol, Matthew's childhood friend, is taking away our child rearing time. I don't like her more than anything. Matthew and I are like siblings. So don't get the wrong idea. She says that every time she sees me. Despite that, she is trying to one-up that she knows more about Matthew than I do, so it's annoying. And my mother-in-law likes Carol too, which is also troublesome. Why didn't Matthew choose Carol instead of that woman? They should have married Carol. When I'm called to my parents' house, they say such things to me on purpose. Every time that happens, my father-in-law scolds them, but they don't seem to care. Carol is a self-proclaimed goofball. I'm a goofball, so I rely on Matthew. I don't mean to make Margaret uncomfortable. It would be okay if she were young. However, she is 28 years old and should consider her age. By the way, the reason why the two of them didn't get together was because of my father-in-law. I don't even want to call her my daughter-in-law. If you insist on it, I'll divorce you. Carol is not a good person by any means. She has many boyfriends and lives as a NET without working. She asks Matthew for what she wants and he buys it for her. My father-in-law hates Carol and strongly opposed their relationship. I couldn't understand why my mother-in-law was so fond of Carol. I'm sorry for my wife. You don't have to apologize. Matthew is also Matthew. He doesn't try to protect you even though he's being bad-mouthed by his wife, and he's close to such a woman. As my father-in-law said, Matthew doesn't protect me no matter what my mother-in-law says about me. He even laughs about it sometimes. Grandma, why are you saying such things? If Mom hadn't met Dad, I wouldn't have been born either. Am I an unwanted child for Grandma? That's not true. Instead, Thomas always protects me. He doesn't know how children are born, but he understands that children can only be born when both parents are present. My mother-in-law also loves her grandson who is such an excellent man, so she avoids saying anything in front of Thomas. It's the same with Matthew, so I felt that parents and children are similar after all. I have a promise to drink with Carol tonight, so I'll be late. Oh, I see. Gradually, I began to think that Matthew was unnecessary for us, and I decided to prepare for divorce. Thomas seemed to have noticed something when he saw me like that. If there's anything I can help you with, let me know. He said that and cared about me. Just then, I was summoned by my mother-in-law. I really didn't want to go, but I had no choice but to go because she kept calling me so much that it would affect my work if I didn't go. There's no one here to carry heavy things because my husband is not here now. So, please buy flour. Apparently, my father-in-law is on a business trip. To be honest, I thought she should have ordered it online, but it was clear that it would only make things worse if I said so. I was exhausted from carrying heavy things after work. Because of that, while I was heading back to my apartment in a daze, my body was blown away by a car. It seems that a car that ignored the signal hit me. The car that hit you ran away and is currently under investigation. I was told that in the hospital bed. For the time being, I left Thomas to my father and decided to be hospitalized for a while. I broke my arm, so I can't work properly like this. If I worried about such things, my father would scold me for not worrying about my own body first. Thomas, my father, and my father-in-law who came back in a hurry after listening to the story visited me frequently, but Matthew and my mother-in-law never came to visit me. Well, it was within expectations. I'm coming in. Huh? So when Matthew came into the hospital room, I was surprised. Write this down. Saying that, Matthew put a divorce paper in front of me. His name was already written on it and his mother's name was written as a witness. You can't work with that arm. Now that you can't earn money anymore, you're useless. What's that? Besides, Carol is pregnant with my child. My thoughts stopped at those words. Carol is pregnant with Matthew's child? I'm going to marry Carol. So write it down quickly. Saying that, Matthew turned his back on me. As if there was no more use for me. I'll divorce you, such a useless poor one without money. Saying that, Matthew left the divorce paper and left. I stared at the divorce paper on the hospital bed in amazement. Certainly, I had been suspicious for a long time. But I never thought he would really cheat on me. And he impregnated her. So am I useless now that I can't earn money while hospitalized? Mom? When I looked up at the voice of my precious son, Thomas and my father were standing there. My father frowned when he saw what I had in my hand. What are you going to do? It's already decided. I answered straight while looking at my father. My father nodded at me. Now let's counterattack. I asked for early discharge by pushing myself a little too hard and headed to the bank where Matthew works. My father who drove me there told me to do my best and dropped me off in front of the bank before going somewhere else. If I enter the bank on foot like this, Matthew will notice me and frown at me. By chance, there were no other customers in front of Matthew. I approached Matthew straight ahead. I'm canceling all employee accounts. Huh? Matthew's expression tells me what are you talking about? I realized some people were looking at us with annoyance because I didn't get a number tag. Oh, sorry. Do you need to know which company? My name is Margaret Diaz. My father recently left Brown Corporation for me. What? Brown Corporation is an IT company founded by my father and currently employs 1,900 people. It has become quite famous in this area as well as in the industry due to its rapid growth in one generation. So even Matthew was surprised with his eyes wide open. That's a lie, isn't it? You're just trying to get back at me. If you think so, why don't you check? Matthew immediately starts checking something in response to my words. After all, my former surname Diaz is unusual, regardless of how it is read. That's why my father put his surname in the company name. While Matthew was checking, I looked around. Since I mentioned the company name, people around us are watching us. Huh? Is it a lie? It seems that he has confirmed it. Matthew looks up at me fearfully. You really are from that Diaz Corporation. Now, let's show him whose daughter he has angered. Opposite to Matthew who turns pale, I smile broadly. So, please cancel it quickly. Wait, if you cancel all these accounts at once. By the way, my father is also very angry about this incident. So pack your things and leave the apartment immediately. Huh? Why do I have to leave? Apparently, he forgot that the apartment was purchased by my father and that the name was also under my father's name. Well, otherwise he might still be living there with Carol after bringing her in during my hospitalization. Did you forget? That apartment was purchased by my father who was the former president. You haven't paid a penny for it and you haven't even paid for your living expenses, have you? You're just supporting your childhood friend and Mistress Carol with everything. I'm even living on my salary alone. Who on earth were you living on? Well. Yet you want to give the apartment to Carol and your mistress because she's pregnant? How much do you think you can make fun of me? I said loudly enough for those around me to hear on purpose. And of course, Matthew panics. After all, he is thought to be serious. That he is cheating on me with his childhood friend without paying any money at home. The eyes of those around us turn cold. Is that true? Huh? The one who spoke to me was the branch manager of this bank. He had been there for a while and had been listening to our conversation. I need to hear more details from you. Our bank employee caused a lot of trouble. Then the branch manager bowed deeply. From there, I was led to the back room and talked with Matthew and the branch manager. There, I told the branch manager about the details again. I'm very sorry for causing trouble. The branch manager sighed deeply and apologized again. And next to him, Matthew looked dissatisfied and lowered his head. I understand how you feel. It's natural not to want to deposit important money in a bank that employs such people. If you're going to cancel it, we'll arrange it. I'm no longer your wife. If you accept one condition, I'll reconsider canceling it. The two raised their faces as if they were expecting those words. It's a good story for the branch manager, but it's the worst for Matthew. If you can fire Matthew there right now, I'd like to continue contracting with this bank. Huh? Of course. He was originally going to be fired. It seems that even the branch manager had intended to do so. And although Matthew looked like he couldn't understand at first, he gradually turned red in the face. And when he tried to say something, There was someone named Margaret's father. Another bank employee came up to us. And I asked him to let them in at the request of me, and Matthew closed his mouth dissatisfied after being thwarted. Wait a minute. Why am I involved? Huh? Mom? Sorry for keeping you waiting. Father firmly grabbed his mother-in-law's arm as he entered. And his mother-in-law, who looked unhappy, found me and glared at me sharply. You're behind this. What are you trying to do? Even though it's just a matter of duty, I'll never forgive you for doing this kind of thing to your mother. Shut up. When his mother-in-law started screaming, Father shouted even more fiercely with an intimidating face. And not only his mother-in-law but also Matthew gave a short scream and fell silent. I know you've been harassing my daughter. You've been calling her for errands and making her carry heavy things. And despite all that, you said that Carol, your mistress, is better than my daughter. And your husband Matthew didn't protect her, he laughed instead. What kind of father lets his child protect herself? Father's angry voice echoes through the bank. Matthew tries to stop him, but he closes his mouth when Father glares at him. Also, I know that Carol was the one who hit Margaret. That woman has already been arrested by the police. Carol did that? Why are you surprised? You're the mastermind. Father shouts again. Meanwhile, Matthew seems to be frozen, not knowing what's going on. You two are the worst. Margaret, let's go home. Yes. I am prompted by my father to leave and head outside. The branch manager follows us and apologizes multiple times. I think I can continue our contract with this branch manager. I hear Matthew and my mother-in-law fighting loudly behind me. It seems like they are blaming each other. Their voices can be heard outside, and customers and other bank employees who were present earlier are whispering to each other that what they heard earlier was true. As planned. Yes, thank you for reacting as expected. Things went according to plan, and we left the bank laughing. As a result, Matthew was fired without incident. Carol was also sentenced to prison thanks to the police's thorough investigation. My mother-in-law was divorced by my father and was found to have instigated Carol to run me over in order to get rid of me. She was also taken away by the police. Welcome back, Mom and Grandpa. Thank you for taking care of Thomas, father-in-law. No problem. It seems like you've settled things nicely. After cornering Matthew and his group at the bank, I went to pick up Thomas from my father-in-law's care. He helped me a lot this time too. He found evidence that my mother-in-law instigated Carol and found a memo outlining their plan to get rid of me and submitted it to the police. I thanked him for everything including this matter, and he smiled and said you did well. After that, I had even busier days than before. I was already busy as an executive as a candidate for the next president, but becoming president this time meant taking on even greater responsibility. And my father started a new company. I've been wanting to start a new company for a long time. He said that he chose to take over the company in order to get back at Matthew. He happily pushed me into becoming president. So both my father and I became busier, so my father-in-law took care of Thomas. Actually, my father-in-law's business trip was forced because my mother-in-law was having an affair with her boss. So he retired early and moved into our apartment room. I'm studying remote work now. I'm thinking of giving him work someday, so I'm sending someone who knows more about it. He seems very capable, so I want him to do his best in our new company. The fathers who seem to have gotten along well after this incident often go back and forth between each other's rooms drinking alcohol and talking about various things. On the other hand, Matthew, who was kicked out, returned home alone. He couldn't get a job at any bank because we spread rumors everywhere beforehand, so he ended up in debt paying me compensation money. He works part-time now without sleeping much every day and came crying to us, but we ignore him as a family. It was rumored that he could become a branch manager if things went well, but he has fallen quite low. When I grow up, I want to be like Grandpa. Thomas respects his father even more after this incident. He thinks his father is a hero who saved him from unpleasant things from Matthew and his mother-in-law. Then will you take over after Grandpa? Yes. My father is delighted with Thomas's willingness to take over after him. I decided to work harder than ever before so as not to lose to such a father. After a while, both my company and my father's company settled down quite a bit. Oh, welcome back, Mom. Good job. Even though I'm exhausted when I come back home, my father-in-law has prepared dinner for me. I helped today too. Really? Good job, Thomas. I'm looking forward to dinner. As I praise Thomas with a smile, my father comes home later. Then the four of us sit around the table and have dinner while chatting. In contrast to us, Matthew and his group have fallen apart. Matthew ended up in debt with loan sharks and was eventually rumored to have been put on a ship. Matthew's family sold their house to repay the debt, and my mother-in-law, who lost her home, was seen under a bridge by an acquaintance. By the way, Carol's parents sent an apology letter. They're good people, so I want you to read it. If you say so, father-in-law. According to Carol's parents' letter, she gave birth in prison. They took the child and moved far away after Carol was released so that she wouldn't have to rely on them. The letter also contained a deep apology to me. Carol's parents seem like very nice people. I hope their child grows up like their grandparents rather than their parents. However, Carol has lost her home with this. I want her to reconsider her sins in solitude. After more than 10 years, we grew up without being tormented by Matthew's existence. Did we even have a father? That's the attitude we have. He seems to remember us, but has erased our existence as irrelevant to him. We did the same thing, and their existence had been completely forgotten. I still want to take over Grandpa's company. If you've thought about it properly and made a decision, I won't object. Thomas chose to take over his father's company. The company he started at that time was a toy company. Starting as an ordinary employee there, Thomas is highly valued because he comes up with ideas one after another. This might make it easier for Thomas to take over the company. Father laughed like that too. He said he would live in the countryside after entrusting the company to Thomas. I'm also looking for a successor and teaching them how to work hard. If he grows up enough, I might retire early and start a new path. While thinking about such things, I work hard as president today too.